Dice spoke last night. Now, he's one of the survivors of the Benghazi attack. He was a member of the security team at the CIA annex. Listen to this from last night.
When Hillary failed to protect her people on the ground, had she done her job that night, we wouldn't have had to compromise the annex. Ty, Glenn, Sean, and Ambassador Stevens would be alive today.
Now, Mark is the co-author of 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi. That's the book. It was made into a movie, and Mark Geist joins us now. Mark, welcome to the program. Good to see you this morning.
Hey, good to see you.
What did Hillary Clinton not do that she should have done that would have helped you in Benghazi?
Well, she should have provided and answered the emails to and the request for security there at the consulate. You know, the consulate was about 8 acres, and it was guarded by 5 diplomatic security officers. And anybody that has ever been around anything to do with security knows that is, I mean, incompletely or completely inadequate. And a lot of that just boils down to the ideology of how they addressed her foreign policy to Libya from the very beginning.
Do you directly blame Hillary Clinton for what happened in Benghazi?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, if you're in charge, you can delegate your delegate your authority, but you can't delegate responsibility. If you're the person in charge and you choose to take that position, as if she chooses to, if she was to be elected president, is she going to take responsibility for the things that go wrong? I mean, she has no problem taking responsibility for the things that go right, but as a good leader, you have to take responsibility for the errors as well as you know, the home runs.
We now know that the contested Trump file was paid for partly by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, but Hillary Clinton says she didn't know about it. The CEO of the Human Rights Foundation, he appeared on this show last night. He says he too was smeared by this outfit behind the anti-Trump file.
Calling them a research firm, I think, is a little bit of a stretch. These are smear artists. Fusion GPS earns the bulk of their money. Their largest payments come from criminal entities that are under a criminal investigation in the United States by prosecutors or law enforcement. And what they've learned is if you want to kill an investigation, if you want to destroy a law enforcement investigation, go after the witnesses, go after the whistleblowers. Fusion GPS isn't just sending research. They're also paying journalists. They're also engaging in payola when it comes to these sorts of things. Because I have the evidence that Ken Silverstein received funds from one of the partners of Fusion GPS, from Peter Fritsch.
Joining me now, economist and author of the book. You got to buy it. It's called The Capitalist Code. Look who's here, Ben Stein, in person.
Honored to be here in person.
So excited you're here, Ben. Hillary Clinton says she didn't know about this work by Fusion. What do you think? Do you believe her?
Of course I don't believe her. I mean, of course she was the boss. She was the head of the campaign. Of course I don't believe her. She knew about it. She knew who was paying for it. She knew they were paying for it. They knew it was a hatchet job. They knew it was going to somehow, in some way or another, come back to haunt Trump. And now they've managed to do this incredible jujitsu thing in which they got that moron Mueller to, well, I shouldn't say that nice person, Mr. Mueller, to act as if the Russians were manipulating Trump and Trump was manipulating the Russians, when all the while it was the Democrats doing every bit of it to attack Trump and make it look like Trump was a Russian stooge. I mean, they managed to muddy the waters on this completely, and the media bought it hook, line, and sinker. It was like there's this alliance on the one hand between leading Democrats, leading law enforcement officials, and the media, all to smear Trump. And he won anyway.
And, you know, the Kremlin has been known to split the difference, to play both sides of the political aisle, to destabilize. It's what they've done in the Ukraine and other countries for decades. Here's former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom last night. Let's have Ben weigh in on this sound.
This whole story gets murkier, dirtier, filthier. The swamp gets deeper, and the animals in there are uglier. I mean, this is just unbelievable. The question is, what is in that affidavit? You know, if that affidavit is the basis is that salacious, you know, crap that was put together by that GPS firm, and if that's the probable cause or the nuggets of probable cause, you know, that's something the Intelligence Committee has to get a look at.
What do you think, Ben?
I think that this is that. you're being too generous to say that the Russians are splitting the difference. I think the Russians knew that they didn't want to have any problems with the American administration no matter what, so they would just get everything all screwed up and make it look as if American politics didn't work. Well, maybe that actually is splitting the difference. Made it look as if American politics didn't work, made it look as if the whole system was a hodgepodge, and just nothing good came out of it from the United States whatsoever. And the amazing thing is that Mueller and the FBI and all these people, Comey, bought every single bit of it, and the media bought every single bit of it. The mainstream media bought every single bit of it, and they jumped in and said, oh, Trump, so Russian agent, Trump, Russian agent, Trump, Russian agent, when in fact, really, it was the Democrats who were manipulating the whole thing. Why aren't they saying that the Democrats were Russian agents? Why are they holding back on that?
Yeah, and could have led to spying at Trump Tower. Who knows?
Well,
get to the bottom of it, right?
Trump said a long time ago, they were listening to me at Trump Towers, and everyone laughed at him and said, oh, he's a paranoid maniac. He turned out to be completely wrong.
Well, remember, the reason for the appointment of the special counsel, the stated reason, was that Jeff Sessions is a potential witness into the investigation of any relationship, if it ever existed, between the Trump campaign and the Russians, because then Senator Sessions had a management role in the campaign. So the appointment of a special counsel needs to be triggered by the inability of the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General to run the investigation. I don't think such a conflict would exist if Mrs. Clinton were going to be investigated. Now, there's several arguments about investigating Hillary. One is, Mr. President, you fired Jim Comey because he dropped the ball on Hillary. So why don't you take that evidence and present it to a grand jury and see whether or not the grand jury indicts her, because the evidence of her guilt is overwhelming. The Lindsey Graham, Senator Graham argument against that is we're not a banana republic, and we don't go after our political opponents just for vengeance purposes. We should let this thing rest. My own view is the evidence of her guilt is overwhelming. Jim Comey was wrong to usurp the role of the Attorney General and announce publicly she's not going to be investigated. President Trump could change that with a phone call to Jeff Sessions. The other request being made about Mrs. Clinton is that there appears to be some evidence of interaction between her campaign and foreign entities to make then-candidate Trump look bad. Remember, receiving, quote, anything of value, closed quote, from a foreign national or a foreign government when you're running a campaign is a felony. These are the allegations against Donald Trump Jr. Now the same allegations are being made against John Podesta, not personally, but people that worked for him in the Clinton camp. So that's the complicated mess that we're confronting this morning. Republicans want Mrs. Clinton investigated because of campaign collusion and because of the email scandal. They want that to be reopened.
In President Trump's tweets about Jeff Sessions and what he sees as Jeff Sessions' faults or failings in his job, does it complicate matters because President Trump is talking about Hillary Clinton, because that does see to some it smacks of he's urging his Attorney General to go after a political opponent.
But listen, if there's evidence of criminality there, and I understand the question, of course, and there is evidence of criminality in the email scandal. We know that. There was a mountain of evidence of her guilt, which Jim Comey dismissed. I don't know if there's any evidence of collusion between Mrs. Clinton's campaign and a foreign national or a foreign government. But the most effective way for the president to address this would be to call the Attorney General. Can the president call the Attorney General and say, I want Mrs. Clinton investigated? Of course he can. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the land. A grand jury can reject it, saying this is political. A federal judge could reject it, saying this is political. But the Attorney General cannot if the president gives him an instruction to look at something.
The President and the Attorney General work together in this environment, given all the tension that we've seen in just the last couple of weeks.
You know, I'm familiar with that argument. And I will take you back to the early 60s. One of the greatest attorney generals we ever had was the president's brother who had managed this campaign. So you really can't say that because the president and the attorney general work together, because they're friends, because they talk to each other, they can't discuss law enforcement.
Trump is after him all the time.
I don't understand that, except I do understand the president's personality. He's obviously trying to send a message to Jeff Sessions personally instead of sending it privately. So he has his means for doing that. But if the question is, can he call Jeff Sessions up and say, investigate Hillary or send the stuff about Hillary to a grand jury?
Yeah.
The answer to those questions is yes.
Lee?
My question, though, is, I mean, he promised he wasn't going to investigate Hillary Clinton. He's like, if I win, this is going to go away.
He did.
And I also feel that a lot of the American people are looking at this that don't support Donald Trump and saying, this seems to be a tit for a tat. This seems to be, you're now saying because you're under investigation, you're going to throw it over here. How does he overcome that? Because he did make that promise.
That is a great argument. That's the argument being made by Senator Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, who's saying we have more important things in this country than vengeance against our former opponents.
Yeah. I mean, I was always taught rise above the petty. Is that not what?
Yeah, but if there was a crime committed,
correct. There's two arguments here. If there was a crime committed, it should be investigated, no matter who the potential defendant is. The other argument is, what would take Bob Mueller off the front pages more than, say, Rudy Giuliani as the independent counsel to prosecute Mrs. Clinton? Just throwing that out.
Former FBI Assistant Director Ron Hosko. Welcome, Ron. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, good to be with you.
Look, Ron, you know from these investigations, so far, have you and your expert eye seen anything specific that lassos Hillary Clinton to any kind of crime?
Not as of today, but we are seeing what seems to me to be a lot of smoke. And smoke is what very often predicates FBI investigations. When they investigate some of that smoke, they may see sparks, they may see fire, or they may see a bit of fog. And so that's their job, is to penetrate that smoke and find out what's really behind it. But between the take that is in the FBI's possession on the laptops, the work-related emails that we have heard about, the things coming out of WikiLeaks right now, the books, the comments about the intersection of power and influence, I think there's plenty here for the FBI to have predicated investigations and to be moving forward with all deliberate speed.
All right. So we're using the arrow analogy. The arrows are flying. Again, they haven't yet hit Hillary specifically. But look, let's get to this Wall Street Journal report. There are these recordings that supposedly came about from a separate corruption case, unrelated, but agents decided that they wanted to pursue it, and yet word is that higher-ups had said, no, you know what, stand down. Why normally do higher-ups say stand down or back off?
You know, there are often legitimate differences of opinion in the predication for a case or what sort of case the FBI may have. And I say legitimate because I think they are very legitimate differences of opinion. And typically that means go back and find more. Build your case with the tools that you have at hand, and then we'll move to the next level. That happens commonly, and often it forms a better case and a more cohesive investigator-prosecutor team. If the difference here is that someone wants to protect or buffer Hillary Clinton from an investigation, that's an important distinction to make. Now, I'm being told there were important meetings at DOJ early this year, and that the FBI was not told to stand down, but to go back and gather additional facts, not discontinue, not turn off the investigation. And in fact, I don't believe any investigations were turned off.
Well, look, a good investigator does not reveal evidence until he or she has just about everything ready to present on the table. But until then, the best that we can do is either get from sources, which Fox News has been working on, but also from experts like you or perhaps even former U.S. attorneys. And I bring that up because Governor William Weld, who is a rival of Hillary Clinton's, he's running on the Libertarian ticket. He's a former brilliant U.S. attorney, and in an interview with CNN, and he's told other outlets multiple times this issue, here's what he said recently, quote, there's no way for Mrs. Clinton to learn what the evidentiary basis is for which they made this update. I think Director Comey did the right thing initially in July by concluding that no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges. Again, Bill Weld was a very tough U.S. attorney. What do you make of that?
Right. You know, the opinions in this case about what Jim Comey did and when he did it are so divided. You know, coming over here the other day, I opened the Washington Post. Here's an opinion piece by Bill Barr, very respected former Attorney General, saying Comey did exactly the right thing. And right next to it is an opinion from Eric Holder that's saying Comey was wrong. And the gap between those two things was about this thin on the paper. That's the gap that Jim Comey's trying to walk through at night in a hurricane. And so I think he's in a very difficult position, but I'm very confident he's doing the right things for what he believes are the right reasons, and the FBI will grind forward towards the truth.
Okay. I need your gut reaction before we go. Is there something there that we just don't know yet? Do you think that things are being held back from the American people?
Oh, I absolutely do. You know, we are in election season. There are DOJ guidelines, so I think there are legitimate reasons to try to fly under the radar during an election season so as to not appear to influence. However, I think there's plenty under the surface. I think we're going to find that there were intrusions into her network, Huma Abedin, Mills, others,